On the morning of April 25th, 1977, four men climbed into a wooden boat and set off toward a small, remote island off the northern coast of Brazil. Three of them were brothers. The fourth was their cousin. They had made this trip many times before. The island had trees, and trees meant timber, and timber meant money, so they went. The island had a name, Crab Island, and it had a reputation. People in the area talked about it. Not everyone went there, and the ones who did usually didn't stay after dark. There were stories of strange lights moving over the treetops at night, voices coming from inside the forest when nobody was there, the kind of stories that get passed around in small communities and that most working men wave off as superstition. These four men were exactly that kind of people. They had been coming to this island for years. They had never seen anything they couldn't explain. The stories didn't concern them. They arrived in the early afternoon, tied up the boat along the riverbank, and spent the rest of the day cutting trees and stacking timber. By early evening, the tide had gone out, which meant the boat was sitting in the mud and wasn't going anywhere for several hours. This was normal. It happened every time. The plan was simple: sleep on the boat, wake up around midnight when the tide came back in, load the timber, and head home. All four of them climbed into the cabin, laid down, and fell asleep. They intended to wake up at midnight. They woke up at 5 a.m. Apolinario, one of the brothers, was the first one up. He looked around the cabin in the gray pre-dawn light and immediately knew something was wrong. The tide had already come and gone. They had slept straight through it, but that wasn't what stopped him. His cousin was not where he had gone to sleep. He was on the floor of the cabin, in a completely different spot, and he was screaming. Apolinario got to him and looked down and froze. His cousin's skin was covered in severe burns. Raw, large, horrible burns across his body, but his clothes, the same shorts he had gone to sleep in, were completely untouched. No scorching, no holes, no damage at all. Whatever had burned through his skin had left the fabric sitting directly on top of it without a mark. While Apolinario was still trying to process what he was looking at, he heard moaning from the other end of the boat. He ran to his brother Firmino. Firmino was also not where he had laid down. He had ended up in a completely different part of the boat, and he had the same burns. Severe, deep burns all over his skin, clothes completely intact. Then Apolinario went looking for his youngest brother, Jose. He found him curled in a corner of the boat. No burns, no marks, nothing visibly wrong with him. He was dead. His body was already cold. Apolinario was the only one of the four men who was physically uninjured. He was now alone on a stranded boat in the middle of a remote island with one dead brother, two severely burned men, and no way to leave until the tide came back in. He waited 8 hours. When the water finally rose enough to move the boat, he sailed it back to the mainland alone and got his family to a hospital. Doctors examined the burns. They were severe and deep. The injuries, according to the medical examination, were consistent with some kind of electrical discharge. The doctors could not explain the mechanism. They could not explain why the clothes were undamaged. The report offered no further conclusion. Police opened an investigation and traveled out to the island. They went over the boat and the surrounding area. They found nothing abnormal, no signs of a fight, no burned surfaces on the boat, no evidence of lightning, no traces of any accelerant. Tests came back negative for drugs and alcohol. The investigation found nothing and went nowhere. The strangest part, beyond the burns, beyond the dead man with no marks on his body, was what the three survivors could tell investigators about what happened that night. Nothing. None of them remembered a single moment after falling asleep. Not a sound, not a flash, not a feeling of heat, not a voice. Nothing. Even under deep hypnosis, conducted by a physician who worked with all three survivors in multiple sessions, the memories simply were not there. The doctor concluded that all three men had a deep mental block that was preventing them from accessing anything from that night. One of the survivors did report a single image, something he said he saw just before blacking out. A ball of fire, hovering in the air outside the boat, and then nothing. Police eventually closed the case without an explanation. The two burned men recovered over time. The youngest brother, Jose, was buried. And for a while, the whole thing faded. A strange incident in a remote place that most people outside the region never heard about. Then 9 years passed. On April 28, 1986, a different group of 4 men traveled to the same island to cut timber. At some point during the night, they lost consciousness. When they came around, one of them was dead. Another had severe, unexplained burns. The other 2 were left with effects that investigators described as serious, but not immediately life-threatening. Same island, 9 years later. One dead. Survivors with burns they couldn't explain and no memory of what happened. The second investigation, like the first one, found nothing. To this day, nobody has ever produced an explanation for what happened on that island, not in 1977 and not in 1986. No natural cause has ever been confirmed. No crime was ever established. The survivors remembered nothing. The dead left no clues. And the island is still there, sitting off the coast of Brazil, largely uninhabited, still visited occasionally by people who go there to cut timber or collect crabs. Some of them still report seeing strange lights over the trees at night.